I'm Haruko Wakabayashi. I'm the Associate Teaching Professor of Rutgers University, and I'm one of the co-editors of this volume. Fernanda Perrone, who is the archivist and head of exhibitions program and curator of the William Elliott Griffiths collection and special collections at the Rutgers University Libraries. She is the other co-editor of this volume, and she is here as well. And she and I will start with 15-20 minute sort of introduction and sharing our sort of thoughts about the book. So we will start with Fernanda. Would you like to go ahead and start?
Sure, thank you. And thanks again for coming. I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone see it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. For me, the two most important factors in the genesis of this book were my experience as curator of the William Elliott Griffiths collection and my encounters with researchers using the collection. Most of you know that the William Elliott Griffiths collection is a special collection on Westerners in Japan during the Meiji and Taisho periods. William Elliott Griffiths was a Rutgers graduate of the class of 1869. And I'm happy to say we have some of Griffiths' descendants in the audience tonight. At Rutgers, he met some of the first Japanese students to come to the United States. After graduation, Griffiths had the opportunity to teach in Japan. First in Fukui on the Sea of Japan, and later in Tokyo. After almost 4 years, Griffiths returned to the United States, determined to interpret Japan to the West. Although he became a minister in the Reformed Church of America, his real life's work was to collect, research, speak, and write about Japan and her sphere of influence. Griffiths was the author of over 20 books about Japan, as well as numerous articles, letters to the editor, and encyclopedia entries. Beginning while he was in Japan, he actively collected books, photographs, manuscripts, and artifacts documenting the country. He kept diaries and maintained wide correspondence. After Griffiths' death in 1928, at the age of 83, his collection came to his alma mater, Rutgers, where it supposedly took up half a freight train car in its slow journey from upstate New York to New Brunswick. During the 1930s, the Rutgers Libraries obtained a grant from the American Council of Learned Societies to fund cataloging work on the Griffiths collection. The collection was forgotten during the war period and only discovered in 1959 by Ardith Burks, a Rutgers professor of political science who was the founder of Rutgers East Asian Studies and Study Abroad. Since then, it has been used by numerous students and scholars from throughout the world. The origin of this book came from a friendship I developed with one such researcher, Dr. Jori Abe, a professor of anthropology at Rikyo University in Tokyo. As an anthropologist, Jori was fascinated by the experience of Kusakabe Taro, the first Japanese student to attend Rutgers College. A specialist in Native American studies, she compared the confrontation Kusakabe experienced between Japanese and American culture to that earlier encounter between Native and European cultures.
Wow.
Jori first visited Rutgers in about 2005, and in 2008 did a program, Moment of Contact, where she gave a nuanced account of Kusakabe's daily experience of New Brunswick. By 2013, Jori and I began to talk about collaborating on a book about Kusakabe, Griffiths, and their circle. Trying to pursue some further research on Kusakabe, however, I realized that although full of promise, he only lived to be 25 years old, tragically dying of tuberculosis in New Brunswick in 1870. Any study would have to extend far beyond Kusakabe Taro. As curator of the Griffiths collection, I was well aware of the depth and breadth of the collection. I knew that Griffiths wrote hundreds, perhaps thousands of letters. So I began to think about to whom these letters were written and from whom they were received. Among his correspondents were Griffiths' former students in Japan, Japanese government officials, missionaries, experts on Japan, and many others. Correspondents lived throughout Japan, Korea, China, North America, and Europe. Imagining the trajectory of Griffiths' letters as lines on a map, the idea of a network slowly was born. At the same time, the concept of networks was gaining traction in historical theory. In his 2014 presidential address to the American Historical Association, Kenneth Pomerantz stressed the importance of, quote, research and occasionally teaching that focuses on diasporic groups, transnational professional or intellectual networks, and other spatially dispersed groups that might nonetheless share some sense of identity in a new understanding of history, a new global understanding of history. Indeed, Griffiths himself wrote about a network of sort in the Rutgers graduates in Japan. Originally an address delivered at the Kirkpatrick Chapel at Rutgers in 1885, published by the Rutgers College Alumni Association as a pamphlet in 1886, and in a new expanded edition in 1916. In 1916, Griffiths counted 16 Rutgers graduates in Japan, both Americans and Japanese. In more recent times, the connection between Rutgers and Japan first received attention from historians in the 1960s, with the launch of the Griffiths collection through the efforts of Ardith Burks. In 1967, Burks organized a 3-day international conference called the Rutgers Japan Conference, a centennial celebration of cultural exchange, held at Rutgers, New Brunswick as part of the 200th anniversary of the university's founding. The outcome of the conference, attended by both American and Japanese expert scholars in the field, was published in 1985 as The Modernizers, Overseas Students, Foreign Employees, and Meiji Japan, edited by Burks and later published in Japanese by Umatani Noboru. The second conference, held in 1987, took place in Fukui and focused specifically on the Oyatoi, foreign workers in Japan, the outcome of which was Zayatoi, a volume in Japanese edited by Shimada Tadashi, Umatani, and others, published in English in 1990 by Edward R. Beauchamp and Akira Ilie as Foreign Employees in 19th Century Japan. This volume includes chapters on 2 former Rutgers students who taught in Japan, William Griffiths and Edward W. Clark. In the late 1970s and 1980s, with the surge of the Japanese economic miracle, several books and dissertations in both English and Japanese explored the role of the overseas Japanese students and the foreign workers invited to Japan in the early years of Japan's modernization, and several of those noted the critical role of Rutgers. Since then, however, few works have been published that fully engage this material. In recent years, the emergence of new interpretive frameworks focusing on global history, transnationalism, network theory, and cultural encounter have sparked new interest in this early international connection. The subject of Western impacts on Japan's modernization in the late 19th century has become an important topic, especially as Japan commemorated the 150th anniversary of the Meiji Restoration in 2018. There has also been a rising interest in local history as many of the universities and churches in Japan that were founded in the 1870s celebrate their sesquicentennials. However, while studies in these fields have, in one way or another, touched upon the importance of Rutgers alumni and the missionaries of the Reformed Church in their early U.S.-Japan encounters, most have focused primarily on an individual or an organization, and thus far none have been able to draw a full picture of their impacts. Most importantly, studies were written in either English or Japanese, so many readers only had access to publications in their own language. Not since Ardith Burke's time has an effort been made to produce bilingual publications. These considerations were in the back of our minds when Jory and I discussed collaborating on a book project. Although at this time we envisioned a co-written rather than a co-edited book, we knew that we had an advantage in that Jory had access to the Japanese sources and could write about them in English. We finally were able to further our collaboration when I received a 1-month fellowship to work with Jory at Rikyo University in fall 2016. The fruit of our collaboration was a panel presentation at Rikyo. My contribution, The Rutgers Network in Early Meiji Japan, was published by Rikyo American Studies in 2017. I also gave another presentation, Griffiths in Fukui, Another Look, at the new Griffiths Museum in Fukui. Both of these presentations would ultimately be incorporated into Rutgers Meets Japan. Attending the presentation in Fukui was a professor at Fukui University, Ryuhei Hosoya Sensei, who would write the epilogue to Rutgers Meets Japan and who is on this call. The following year, Jory and I were invited to participate in a symposium at the Fukuzawa Memorial Center for Modern Japanese Studies at Keio University on overseas students during the 19th century.
Where's Keio? And it's in
Tokyo. Sorry. The symposium was organized by Fuji Takagi, an emeritus professor at Otsuma Women's University Junior College Division, a Keio alumnus, and visiting scholar at the Fukuzawa Memorial Center. He was previously a visiting scholar at Rutgers from April 2002 to March 2003, conducting research on the Griffiths collection. He collaborated with Haruko Wakabayashi on a chapter in Rutgers Meets Japan, Envisioning a New Japan, Matsudaira Shungaku, Yokoi Shonan, and the Bakumatsu Network at the dawn of the Rutgers Japan connection. My presentation at this symposium, Invisible Network, Japanese Students at Rutgers During the Early Meiji Period, was published in English and Japanese in the Bulletin of Modern Japanese Studies in 2017. This presentation was inspired by my attempts over the last few years to come up with a comprehensive list of Japanese students who attended Rutgers. I could only find about 20, but I was mystified. I could only document about 20, but I was mystified by names of other Japanese who appeared to be in New Brunswick. For example, were listed in the 1870 U.S. Census, but had no affiliation to Rutgers. Particularly intriguing were 2 group photographs of young Japanese men in New Brunswick from 1870, this is 1870, and 1871, respectively. They were identified by name, and although some were familiar, others were not. I began to do in-depth research on these men and discovered that while some attended the Rutgers Grammar School, the secondary school that was part of Rutgers at the time, others attended schools in New York or Massachusetts and were visiting. I began to envision a network of railway lines branching out from New Brunswick by which Japanese students on the East Coast kept in touch with each other. This was the origin of the concept of the invisible network. I later incorporated this research in my chapter on Rutgers in the 19th century in Rutgers Meets Japan. My theory was confirmed by another Japanese researcher who attended both the Rikyo and the Keio symposia. I had first met Satoshi Shiozaki, a professor at Takushoku University in Tokyo, in 2017 when he came to use the Griffiths collection. After seeing him at the symposium, he visited the United States again, pursuing his research on Japanese students in Boston and New York. He contributed a chapter in Rutgers Meets Japan called A Comparative Study of New Brunswick and Boston as Hubs for Japanese Ryugakusei. Little did I realize it at the time, but I was beginning to develop a 21st century network of Griffiths researchers who would enable our book to ultimately become a reality. It was at this stage that my collaboration with Jori Abe took a tragic turn. Jori was diagnosed with cancer in early 2017. She lived for 2 more years, but was unable to do much work because of her illness and subsequent treatments. We did submit a preliminary proposal to Rutgers University Press, who were interested but wanted to see more. After Jori's death in March 2019, I thought that was the end of our book project, since there was no way I could do it on my own. Meanwhile, in 2018, I met Haruko Wakabayashi and introduced her and her classes to the Griffiths collection, and gradually a new collaboration was born. I'm very sad that Jori did not live to see the results of our labors. She published one short article about Kusakabe Taro, the Pale Flame, Taro Kusakabe's 1,000 Days in America, in the Japanese journal Gengo in 2006, and a book chapter, The Making of Modern Japan and Western Civilization, in an English language work, Japanese Civilization in the 21st Century, 2016. We thought at first that she could make some sort of posthumous contribution to our book. Her assistant at the Rikyo American Studies Department found her PowerPoint on Kusakabe Taro, but unfortunately there was no script or anything that could be turned into a manuscript. Jori was justly proud of a document she discovered at Rutgers that we had somehow missed, Kusakabe's transcript, which showed his 97 average. I don't know if you can read that, but he got all 95, 97, 96. He was number 1 in his class. A copy of this document was doubtlessly among those research notes that Jori donated to the Fukui City Museum. Thank you.
Thank you, Fernanda. And I will pick up from where Fernanda left. For me, this book is a product of a series of unexpected encounters and connections. The first of which was in 2017 when I began teaching at Rutgers. Coincidentally, this was the year when Rutgers renewed its agreement with Fukui University, and it was then that I learned about Kusakabe Taro and William Griffiths and about the Griffiths collection. This was when I first met Professor Hosoya from Fukui University as well. And in 2018, Paul Shallow and I visited Fukui to further discuss potential collaborations with Fukui University. And 2 ideas emerged from this visit. One was to create a course on this topic that would involve some kind of exchange. And 2, to celebrate our historic friendship in 2020, which marked 150 years since 1870, the year of Kusakabe Taro's death in New Brunswick, and the year when William Griffiths left for Japan. In 2019, I proposed to teach an interdisciplinary honors seminar titled Rutgers Meets Japan, revisiting the early US-Japan encounters, with an embedded trip to Fukui. I simultaneously began planning a conference, Rutgers Meets Japan, Foreign Teachers, Missionaries, and Overseas Students, to be held in March 2020. I believe that this was when I reached out to Fernanda, who helped me prepare for the seminar and connected me to some potential speakers. The seminar was offered in spring 2020, but as you all know, with the pandemic, the class went online, the trip to Fukui was canceled, and the conference was postponed and held virtually the following year. This, however, marks the beginning of a new research project. I gained more knowledge about the history through teaching the class and made more connections through organizing the conference. I also learned about and was connected to the archives of the Reformed Church at the Sage Library, right next door, and the rich collection of Meiji prints and photographs at the Zimmerli Art Museum. As a historian, I was alarmed that there was no scholar of Japanese history at Rutgers working on this important and fascinating topic. As a member of Rutgers faculty, I felt that this story should be more widely known within the Rutgers community and beyond, especially by students who are studying Japanese and Japanese culture, and the Japanese community in New Jersey and New York. I also knew, not being a specialist of 19th century Japan, that I cannot do this alone. And so began our collaborative research project, which eventually included 15 scholars in the US, Japan, and Canada, and funded by the Toshiba International Foundation, Rutgers Global Research Grant, and New Jersey Historical Commission. It took us more than 5 years and multiple conferences and workshops until the book was finally complete. Oh, I was supposed to show this, I'm sorry. And so the book consists of 5 parts, and here are the 5 parts, 15 chapters, and an epilogue by 15 scholars from the US, Japan, and Canada. When I began the research, I quickly learned that there were many missing pieces in the narrative of Rutgers-Japan connections that had been widely circulated. Much of the focus was on Kusakabe Taro, the first Japanese student from Fukui, and on William Griffiths, the first American teacher who went to Fukui. But there were many more Japanese students who came to Rutgers and other American teachers and missionaries who went to Japan. For this project, I wanted to paint a fuller picture of this historical exchange. Who were the people involved? Why did they come to Rutgers or go to Japan? What did they achieve? How were their lives impacted by this exchange? And most importantly, how were they connected? Fernanda's early article on the Rutgers Japan Network was very inspiring in this respect. And there were multiple networks that were formed and connected to create a vast trans-Pacific network that fostered an exchange of knowledge of culture. There were, and I can't see my own, okay, a network of innovative leaders from the late Edo period who sent numerous students to the United States during the turbulent era. A network of missionaries, Rutgers College, and the residents of New Brunswick who welcomed and supported these Japanese students. A network formed by Japanese students who connected with one another after arriving in the US. A network that sent and received Rutgers alumni to Japan as missionaries and teachers. And so this book is a multifaceted examination of how these networks influenced Japan's modernization and Japan-US exchanges in the late 19th century. So we open our book with the key person in this Trans-Pacific network, the Reformed Church missionary Guido F. Verbeck, who is right in the middle of this picture here. He had taught many young Japanese men in Nagasaki, some of whom aspired to study abroad. He introduced dozens of his students and acquaintances to John Ferris of the Board of Foreign Missions in New York, who then helped them settle in New Brunswick and study at Rutgers Grammar School or Rutgers College. This was undoubtedly the most direct and obvious explanation to how the Japanese students came to Rutgers. Verbeck himself is a remarkable figure who not only was an influential teacher, but became an advisor to the newly formed Meiji government. We asked James Holmes, who was one of the few scholars who had worked on Verbeck, to join our team. However, this is not all to the story of how the first Japanese students came to Rutgers. These students were sent by their lords, fathers, and mentors with a strong sense of mission to bring back the knowledge from the US and make change in Japan. If you're familiar with Bakumatsu Meiji history, Yokoi Shonan, whose nephews were the very first to come to New Brunswick in 1866, and we have Matsudaira Shungaku, whom Kusakabe Taro served, and Katsukaishu, whose son and disciples came to New Brunswick not long after Yokoi and Kusakabe. And these are all big names. They were leading reformers during the final years of Tokugawa shogunate, and Fukui was not just a quiet, scenic city on the coast of Sea of Japan that it is today. Its lord Matsudaira Shungaku played a major role in the central government with his advisor Yokoi Shonan and naval minister Katsukaishu. In other words, these were not isolated cases of students randomly sent to the United States. There clearly were connections or networks back in Japan from which they emerged. Without understanding this context, we cannot see the full picture of the history. Takagi Fuji, mentioned earlier by Fernanda, who had written a book about the Yokoi brothers and a chapter on Kusakabe, was an invaluable resource and a mentor, as he had also written extensively on Matsudaira Shungaku and Yokoi Shonan. Another person I'd like to mention is Noriko Ochiai of Edo Tokyo Museum. And it's actually a crazy story about how I met her. I have, since 2000, been doing translations for Edo Tokyo Museum. And a week before the 2021 conference, I received a new batch of items to translate. And the first item was this one here.
Oh, yeah.
Believe it or not, it was a poem written by Katsukaishu for his son who was leaving for the United States. And of course, United States was Rutgers. And Ochiai-san happened to be the curator who was in charge of this particular item. She is a specialist on Katsukaishu. And so with Takagi Sensei and Ochiai-san, we had specialists on Bakumatsu Meiji history on board. By sheer chance, Eri Kitada, who was pursuing her graduate work at Rutgers at the time, introduced me to Yukako Otori, a PhD candidate studying 19th century US immigration at Harvard, who also happened to be a descendant of one of the mentees of Katsukaishu, who accompanied his son to New Brunswick. So she and Ochiai-san worked together on a chapter on Katsukaishu and his son Koroku. The Japanese students, once they arrived in New Brunswick, formed a network of their own, which were intimately tied to the local communities of New Brunswick and beyond. Satoki Shiozaki, who has been working on Japanese ryugakusei in the US, particularly in the Boston area, was the perfect person to ask for a comprehensive overview of Japanese students on the East Coast. His earlier book on Boston students claimed Boston as the hub of Japanese students in the late 19th century. But after taking part in this project, he acknowledged that New Brunswick indeed was the first hub before students began moving further out. Fernanda, of course, was the person to write about Rutgers in the 19th century. And meanwhile, I learned that many Japanese students chose not to attend Rutgers college or grammar school, but to study under private tutors. Reverend Edward Corwin of Hillsborough Reformed Church at Millstone, about 10 miles from New Brunswick, was one such tutor. Oh, and this is New Brunswick, and this is Millstone. Was one such tutor with whom many Japanese students, including Kusakabe, spent time with. Reverend Fred Mueller, who I just found out had sadly passed away in 2024, generously shared his findings about these Japanese students at Millstone, which led to my chapter on Millstone. The diaries of Orita Hikoichi, the first Japanese student at Princeton, and Kanda Naibu, who later went to Amherst, both of who studied with Corwin, attest to a vibrant network of Japanese students that extended beyond New Brunswick. We wanted to make sure we covered the experiences and network of American Rutgers alumni who went to Japan as teachers and missionaries. Griffiths, of course, was one such alum, and while Fernanda wrote about his experiences in Fukui, Joe Henning explored how he used his experiences in his later works to promote himself as a true interpreter of Japan. Another interesting figure is Edward Warren Clark, Griffiths' classmate from Rutgers, who taught in Shizuoka, hometown of the Tokugawa, through the introduction of Katsu Kaishu. So clearly, the Rutgers Japan network provided him with an opportunity to work in Japan. But Hamish Ian also reveals that new connections were made once he arrived in Shizuoka, which led to an unexpected contribution of knowledge by Clark to Nakamura Masanao, a leading Meiji intellectual who was translating John Stuart Mill's On Liberty at the time. Another exciting discovery for me was that two sons of Iwakura Tomomi, one of the most powerful figures of Meiji Japan, who led the famous Iwakura mission to the US and Europe in 1871 to 73, also attended Rutgers Grammar School. And then there were students from Satsuma, one of the first domains to send a group of students to study in Europe, and the leading domain that overthrew the Tokugawa shogunate. John Van Sant, who has written extensively on Japanese students in America, wrote a chapter on Satsuma students for this book. These students from Satsuma, who were connected with Mori Arinori, the ambassador of Japan in DC at the time, who was also from Satsuma, and those who came with the Iwakura brothers, and mentees of Katsu Kaishu, a former Tokugawa retainer, were recruited locally to take part in the Iwakura mission once they arrived in DC. They also successfully lobbied for David Murray, who was a professor of math and astronomy at Rutgers, to be appointed by the mission to serve as the superintendent of Ministry of Education from 1873 to 1878. We added a chapter on Murray, which is an edited version of one of his chapters from his book on David Murray, also from Rutgers University Press. And last but not least, missionaries played an extremely important role in this Rutgers Japan network, and we invited 3 Japanese scholars of missionary history, Rui Kohiyama, Koji Nakajima, and Naoto Tsuji, to join our team. I already mentioned Verbeck, who was not a Rutgers alum, though he later received an honorary doctorate from Rutgers, but there were Rutgers graduates who went on to the theological seminary and then went to Japan as missionaries. They were instrumental in founding of 2 prominent missionary schools, Meiji Gakuin and Ferris Seminary, and laying the foundations of modern Christian education in Japan. And the epilogue was written by Ryuhei Hosoya, which I will come back to later. But this is the book. And I would also like to announce that thanks to Sungmin, Isaiah, Monica, and other members of the university libraries, we have just launched a digital companion to the book. So please explore this as well. And what is remarkable about this history is the way in which it has been remembered for the past 150 years. As Ryuhei Hosoya, who has since retired but is here today, and he has worked relentlessly to revive and revitalize Rutgers Fukui relationship during his tenure at the University of Fukui, writes in the epilogue that there have been waves of 50-year intervals in the remembrance of this history. So William Griffiths was in Japan in the 1870s. He returned from Japan to the US and published The Mikado's Empire in 1876 and continued publishing and giving lectures on Japan and Asia. But the first 50 years came in 1926 to 27 when Griffiths was invited to Japan and revisited Japan and received the Medal of Honor from the Emperor of Japan at the time. This was 50 years after Griffiths left Fukui, and his former students greeted him with enthusiasm when he visited Fukui, and this also became an occasion to revive the memory of Kusakabe Taro. Yes. And then another wave came in the 1960s and 70s with the discovery by Ardith Burke of the Griffiths collection and successive symposia with Fukui and at Rutgers, pushed by Japan's economic boom. But this was when the graves of Japanese students at Willow Grove Cemetery were restored and the Kusakabe Griffiths Japanism Gallery was installed with donations from Fukui City and under the leadership of Phyllis Dennis Kate at Zimmerli Art Museum. It was during this time that a partnership was established between Fukui University and Rutgers, followed by sister city relationship between New Brunswick and Fukui, and the sister state prefecture relationship with New Jersey and Fukui. The history has since been quietly remembered until 2020, when we attempted to revitalize the relationship amidst the unexpected pandemic. Well, incidentally, this year marks the 150th year since the publication of Griffiths' Mikado's Empire in 1876 and 100th since his last visit to Japan in 1926 and 27. And I just realized that it's 45th year since the academic partnership was established between Rutgers and Fukui University. So I see this as a perfect opportunity to create another wave of remembrance, and we're planning several events and activities to celebrate the legacy of Rutgers Japan connections. We are in the planning and almost at the opening, I think, of special exhibits at Zimmerli Art Museum, Edo Tokyo Museum, Katsukaishu Memorial Museum, and Fukui City History Museum in New Brunswick and also in Tokyo and Fukui. And all four museums are collaborating together and working on a digital exhibition as well. We are also planning exchanges with Fukui University. We're expecting some Fukui University students and faculty visiting Rutgers in the fall, in September. And hopefully a symposium on Griffiths' legacy and critical assessment of his works sometime during 2026-27. And most importantly, for all of you here, if you could save the date, we are organizing a celebration at the Kirkpatrick Chapel on September 12th. To commemorate this 150th and 100th anniversary of Griffiths' publication and revisiting of Japan, but also as an occasion to celebrate the friendship between Rutgers and Japan. So please, everybody, come. This event will be open to public. And this is actually the brochure, the flyer from the event that happened in 1977, also at Kirkpatrick Chapel. As for my own research, just very quickly, I have found more topics that I would like to further explore. And one in particular has been prompted by the discovery with Ochiai-san of Edo Tokyo Museum of the letters exchanged between Griffiths and Katsukaishu. The letter that Griffiths wrote to Katsukaishu, we discovered, was in the Katsukaishu Memorial Museum in Tokyo. And the letter written by Katsukaishu to Griffiths, I knew was in the Griffiths collection at Rutgers. And when we sort of read the two letters and compared, we discovered that these were corresponding to each other. Griffiths had written to Katsukaishu, and Katsukaishu had written in response. What's actually very fascinating about this exchange of letters is that it was written a year after the Sino-Japanese War in 1895. And the letters provide a fascinating exchange of views over Japan's position in Asia between Griffiths, who was a leading Japanophile in America at the time, and Katsukaishu, an Asian politician and critic of rapidly imperializing Japan. So I see this only as a beginning. It was a true pleasure working with all the scholars on this project, and I hope to continue expanding this trans-Pacific network of scholarship as we further our understanding of the history of Rutgers and Japan. Thank you very much.